Hello and welcome to Our Last Meal, the podcast on grief, loss, and food. I'm your host, Andrew. I'm recording this a few days after Father's Day weekend, and I hope you all had a good weekend. Whether you have a father still with you that you can celebrate with, or whether you've lost them, I hope you had a good weekend. Personally, I got to spend some time with my family, my side of the family, my wife's side of the family. We had a chance to have a cookout and do one of my favorite things in the world, which is eat good food and make memories with the people you care about. I consider myself very lucky that I had an opportunity to do that and invite family over to our house and break bread. We also got to spend some time with a neighbor who we really like and care about, and it was just really nice. It's one of those days that, maybe everything wasn't perfect, but I will say that I know that we got to make great memories. And I think about my daughter, 5 years old, and I want to hope that she got to make some core memories too with her extended family. Every week on this podcast, I talk to somebody about grief, loss, and someone important to their life that they've lost, and how food played a role in their relationship. This week, I'm going to be talking with the host of the 34 Questions podcast, 34. I hope you enjoy the episode. I hope you enjoy the podcast. If you do, please take a moment to rate the show on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. That really does help. I also hope that you're enjoying the podcast because I'm really enjoying making it. It's just so nice to get to have real meaningful conversations with people. And this is something that's been incredibly humbling for me personally. And I'm just really excited about the conversations that I've got coming up in the coming weeks and months. And with that said, if you're interested in being a guest on the podcast and sharing your story of loss, grief, and food, then please reach out at ourlastmealpod@gmail.com or click on share your story at ourlastmealpod.com. Finally, just given the nature of these conversations, I do want to warn listeners up front. There is discussion of death and loss, so please be aware if this is a sensitive or difficult topic for you. Just be mindful. With that said, let's jump into our episode. So joining me today is my guest, 34, host of the 34 Questions podcast. For sure, I appreciate you being on.
No problem, man. Definitely excited to be on, and thank you for the invite.
Yeah, of course. Of course. How you doing today?
Doing good, doing good. It's my second week of running the summer program. I work with high schoolers, so we have this program where for graduating seniors, we're trying to set them up for the real world, sort of. And I think it's a lot to pack into 7 weeks, but just going with the flow, trying to impart wisdom on them that hopefully they'll take with themselves throughout their life. But we'll see. It's the second day, and it's been going well.
Oh, that's incredible, though. So when you say talking about like life skills, what kind of things do you get into?
So, right, the main focus is to get them a job. Like we're paying them to be a part of this program, so we framed it as a job to them. But we know they know it's not a real job. We're not really like you know forcing them to do any particular task. It's just more so let's help you how to job hunt. Let's help you how to interview. Let's help you how to do your cover letters, which I think is almost as important, if not more important, than a resume, just because that's like the thing that's going to get you the upper leg in a lot of places. But yeah, so that's 1 week. There's another week where I do personal branding because I'm trying to run a podcast. I have some experience. Before the podcast was a clothing brand, which didn't really take off, but I gave it my best shot at the time. So yeah, just things that I want the kids to be creative and feel like they can do things for themselves. Which I think we all have a problem sometimes with leaning on folks or resources a little too much. So I've always been the kind of person I learn by doing, and I've done a lot of stuff. So I want the kids to avoid all the wrong turns that I've taken, and that's what I'm trying to teach them. I don't know too much about finance. I wish I could teach them about finance or economics and whatnot, but yeah, that's like the missing part of our program that will probably get better as the years come by.
Yeah, but I mean, it's still just that you're focusing on those things already at that age is so important. I mean, in my day job, my personal life, I mean, I work in a corporate setting, And I've participated in so many interviews, and one of the things that most people struggle with really is trying to sell themselves and their abilities and their skill set, and just having that confidence to go into an interview and just be open with somebody. So,
Mm.
getting that kind of practice and like, real world examples at such a young age, that's going to be just invaluable to them. I guarantee that.
Um, I appreciate the kind words, man. And yeah, as far as like, I'll tell you more about my personal life. I've had
Yeah.
17 jobs in 10 years, which makes me feel, even though I'm not like a resume wizard or cover letter wizard or nothing, I just feel like that experience I've had being able to land at least 17 jobs in my lifetime is, something I could impart wisdom to these kids. And yeah, cover letters for sure, I think is like,
Yeah.
I don't know if you've been through the interview process a lot and you've maybe read a few cover letters, but that's where really your personality gets to shine and a way for you to just already um, tell your story that's relatable to the position, which is, I think, a very powerful tool when it comes to trying to find a job.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, yet if you've gotten 17 jobs, that means you know how to interview. So if anybody can teach, I mean, that's right
Uh,
in your wheelhouse, right?
I've definitely had some really bad interviews as well, but I think I needed those, right, just to be better at them. But I think it's weird, man. Like I want to say I had the most highest paying jobs. A lot of my jobs were probably the ones that needed people to come in immediately, so it wasn't too hard of an interview. But I know when an interview is going well, and I know when an interview is going bad. It's just
Yeah,
a lot of it is really the energy and the vibe. Like I remember since I've done so many, someone was like, don't you already know? Like based like they'll ask me how to go and I would say, oh, it's great. And it's like, oh, you probably got it. Or if I went back and said, oh, it's terrible, then they know that I'm not gonna get the job. It's at that point for me.
yeah. I think the idea of going in and being yourself and just trying to, just being as comfortable as you can is important. I remember one time interviewing someone and they were incredibly nervous, and I could tell that. So when I've interviewed people in the past, I always try to make sure that I was try to be as conversational as possible whenever we were just even going from the entry of the building to my office so that we could sit down. Because really, if you're comfortable, I'm going to get a better sense of who you are, and it's going to give you a chance to put the best foot forward. But this person, they were just so nervous, and I could tell. And I just kind of paused this a few minutes in, and I said, "Hey, I understand you're nervous. I get that, but no need to be nervous here. This is just us having a conversation. If you take a second, and just kind of breathe." They turned around and they knocked it out of the park. I think just getting that
Interesting.
reassurance, just that, hey, this is just a conversation. This is just two people talking. This is nothing to stress out about. I think it gave them the peace of mind to go to that place where they knew who they were and what they were talking about, and it turned it around for them.
That's what's up. Yeah, I think that's super huge for you being the interviewer, like just giving them that cushion. I know for me, I've definitely had those moments. I think it also depends what this job means to a person. Like I know for me, when
Sure.
I've had major moments in my life, it's like, okay, this job is like life changing. I need to be on my A game, and that would make me nervous in the past. But yeah, I think for you as the interviewer, just to verbalize it and let them know, because we're always assuming in our minds. So
Right.
kudos to you, man.
Yeah, I can't take too much credit for that. It's one of those things. I started, my first job when I was 14 years old in high school was working at a grocery store, pushing carts and cleaning bathrooms, bagging groceries. Um, I still sometimes just feel like, okay, it's amazing to me that I've gotten as far as I have. So I still have that mentality of being that 14-year-old kid who was, just sweating and doing the dirty work that nobody else wanted to do just to make a few bucks. So
Mm.
it's not everybody has that mentality, but really, I just try to remind myself as often as I can that if I feel lucky that I'm where I'm at, that I've had the chances I've had, so I'm gonna try to push that onto other people anytime I can. It makes a difference, Try to put some good out there and hope some good comes back.
No doubt, no doubt. Yeah, definitely a big believer in karma.
Right.
So I hopefully it pays back through your podcast. People give you opportunities and chances.
Yeah. Well, and I'll say too, I mean, this is still early in podcasting is still early for me, but so far I've had a chance to meet some great people and just have some really interesting conversations. I was actually talking with my wife earlier. One of the cool things has been just people from different backgrounds, speaking to folks from the UK, from the Ozarks. I'm in North Carolina. And now, you're in California. Just this idea that you get to meet people with different backgrounds, but there's still a lot of commonality. And I think the more that you talk to people, the more you find you really do have a lot in common. And I'm just seeing that firsthand constantly, and I love that.
It's incredible, man. And I think a lot of us interviewers, podcasters, I think that's the fire in us. Like that's the spark that we're drawn to when it comes to interviewing people or just wanting to meet new people. I know just today I was reminded that like human instinct or human nature, we're sociable creatures. It's one of those things that's a part of us. But I don't know what it is for you yourself and for myself that it just seems like that's more important or that's prioritized in our minds, like this is something that's important, and it builds in my life experience, or it adds to my life experience. um so yeah, because I know not a lot of folks are like that either, so there's something about it.
Yeah, yeah. So you said that you went through something like that with today. Like, what was it today that kind of sparked that thought for you?
You know, so part of our senior program is that we do training. They're training to be youth workers, or to to be able. They're graduating seniors, and they're going to be working with freshmen, maybe even middle schoolers. So it was youth development training that was happening today, and decided to join in. So it was my boss's boss who was giving the training, and so I was sitting there as he was explaining youth development to these teenagers. But like I think he assumes that I know already what he's teaching. Um, but for me, I'm just like, I take it in. Some people think trainings are stupid, and that you don't get any new information. But I always like to just keep an open mind. So I'm sitting there, and I'm trying to think what happened. I think he was breaking down like the outcomes we want for these students to have when they become early adults, and then he worked his way back to like what we do in the program for them, and what's the base ground for it, like what is the reasoning, the why behind what we do. I work for the YMCA, so
Right.
there's also an ad for the YMCA, but
Of course, man.
one of them is for yeah, like you want to build relationships and working with young students. Well, this is the thing that stuck out to me. He's like, always try to remember kids' names, because he cited a study that was like, if you can call somebody by their name, then like you get 100% of their attention. But if you call them by like, hey you, or hey guy, hey dude, or whatever, it's like it's only a fifth of that, instead of the 100% of attention. And I'm like, oh, that's pretty crazy. So
Wow.
learning names, especially with like younger kids, once you know their name, they like gravitate towards you, just because like this guy knows who I am. So I was like, damn, this is pretty crazy. And he tied it back to how oh, what's it called? We're sociable creatures. So
That makes perfect sense to me, though. So especially if you're talking about like with younger kids, I mean, because I remember being like that age. I'm sure you do too. I mean, whenever you feel like somebody's meeting you at your level and not talking down to you, actually talking to you with respect and you know, like an adult or like an actual human being and not just just a nuisance. I mean, that tends to go a long way. So it's not
mhm.
surprising to me that they would respond better to that.
Yeah, no doubt. I don't know what your experience was like growing up, but me looking back on it, I had this blend of people who I mean, my parents raised me to respect my elders, so that was like the thing in my head. Anytime I met teachers, coaches, whatever, it's like I respect the people older than me. So I had a blend of that, but also I just had this feeling that a lot of adults approached me that way, where they didn't talk down on me. And maybe it was because I wasn't a bad kid, I wasn't being disrespectful, so they never felt like they had to be authoritative to me. So because I had that experience, that's kind of shaped how I interact with my high schoolers. It's just like I'm just somebody that's here that cares about you and trying to add value to your life. And because I felt like a lot of the adults in my life were trying to do the same thing. So I mean, I know that's very unique to my experience, but I'm very thankful that's it's helped me become the person I am today.
I mean, that, to me, that's incredible, and that's a testimony though too to treating younger folks with with respect and like people and like adults. I mean, giving them a chance to be heard. You said that that's the experience you have, and just look how it shaped you and the way you're interacting with people now. That's the kind of thing that when you put some positive out there, we were talking about karma a second ago. It really does feel like putting positive out there. It doesn't just stop with where you put it. It's gonna continue to just keep moving. It's this trickle down thing of if I treat somebody with respect and kindness, you never know how they're going to turn around and how they're going to treat somebody else. So it does go a long way.
No doubt, no doubt. And I mean, for me, I'm also or I try to be a realistic person. Sometimes
Uh-huh.
I have my rose-colored glasses on too much, but sometimes it stops, right? Like you can be great to other people, but there's just going to be some people who don't want to pass it on, don't. And I always believe like everyone is like that at some point. It's not
Yeah,
whatever a person's been through, that's how they're feeling in that moment. I don't believe that, you know, I hope that they pass it on to somebody they care about because they might not care about everybody. But I know
true.
there's people that they care about, and hopefully that energy just gets passed on to their people.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I mean, it's also one of those things, and this is where it's hard. I think it's one of those things of, you know, we don't know where everyone's been, what they've been through, what their life experience has been like. So it's easy for us to, I think, as humans, it is easy for us to just assume the worst in somebody whenever they don't respond to us the way that we feel they should or we were hoping that they would. But and I'm like you. Maybe it's rose-colored glasses. Maybe it's I'm too optimistic. But I want to hope that people are inherently good, or at least that they start that way. And there may be something that changed that in them, that took that away from them, or that beat them down. But I and as I'm saying this, I realize like how ridiculous this may sound, like how too optimistic this is. But I want to hope that people, even if they are in a negative place, or even if they are in a place where they don't treat others with kindness, that some level of kindness, respect, decency towards them can change them or have some kind of impact. Um, some people might be too far gone, but I want to hope that, and if nothing else, I just feel like if I can say that I treated people with decency at the end of the day, even if it didn't change them, I can go to bed at night knowing I didn't make anybody's day worse today.
True. Yeah, man. I mean, it's you actually brought up one of my questions on my podcast, which is, would you believe that people are ultimately good? And the more people I've had on, this was definitely something I believed when I was younger, and the more
Yeah,
people I've had on, it's opened my eyes, or opened my view a little bit. I'm a big believer in balance. Like, there's never too much good, there's never too much bad. It's just a complete balance in the bigger picture. Um, so when it comes to people being good or bad, I think I've chosen that, like, we are good and bad at the same time. In my case, and for other people like myself, I think I want to be good to other people, but I'm even worse to myself.
yeah.
Um, and like that's a whole nother.
All right, sorry about that. Looks like we had a technical issue, but so you were talking about balance of good and bad.
Yeah, yeah. So like I said, I think for a lot of folks, they want to be good to the people around them. But internally, there's like this struggle where I think we're the biggest critics of ourselves, right? So I think that's where the balance lays. Obviously, there's people who just want to do harm to other people. And I think, you know, maybe there's some chemistry going on in their brains that just isn't as right. Or sorry, I don't mean I would say I'm right and they're wrong, but that
I
isn't
know.
in tune with how I think.
Yeah, and I think the point you made there about people inherently being better towards others and harder towards themselves, I definitely think that's true. Um, so I would say I think I believe that people are inherently good. I look at kids, and so I'm a father of a 5-year old, and when I meet her, I'm like, or when meet her, I've known her since she was born. But when I see the way she talks and thinks and interacts with other people, she is just pure good. She, at 5 years old, she doesn't know how to be racist. She doesn't know how to think that people can't do something or can do something because they're a boy or girl. She doesn't hate anybody for any reason. She doesn't think people are inherently bad. The only time that she dislikes somebody is if she thinks somebody's being mean to somebody else. So
Mm,
she's at 5 and being tiny, she's got this protective instinct. So I look at her and she's good, and just I think that's the norm for most kids. I think we as adults we take that out of them, and it's something that we over time we use the excuse of, okay, we have to toughen you up, and yeah, the world's not going to be fair, so you do have to prepare your kid for that. But I think the way we go about it sometimes is all wrong, and that we just focus on the fact that life's not fair, or I had to suffer, so you need to understand that too. I don't think that's the way to talk with kids and to bring them up. So with
mm.
our daughter, we try to make sure that she understands that she's lucky that there are kids around the world who don't have the same things that she has. That she understands that she is lucky to have what she has and to be where she is, and just so that she understands that. But I don't ever want to take that twinkle out of her eye or make her think like, oh, you have to be a mean person to survive this world, because I just don't think that's the case.
I got you. I got you. And man, it sounds like you have a dope ass kid, man. Oh, sorry for cussing, but
No, that's fine. She is.
yeah,
She's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah. So I think like in your case with your daughter, that's great that you see that light in her. And yeah, as a parent, I think the best thing you could do for her is try to keep that light growing. And earlier when you said that, you just when you meet your daughter, I think for a parent, and I'm not a parent myself, so I can't really speak on it, but I think it's a continuous meeting, right? Because your daughter
Yeah.
continues to grow and change. So like you're meeting your daughter at this point in her life, and then you're gonna meet her again as she gets older, and you're gonna be like, damn, this my little girl,
Yeah.
But
No,
yeah.
that's true though. I mean, because it's crazy to me to just see how much she's grown, one, but then just how much she's changed. I mean, I see that, like, the things I see that she's interested in now. Like, she has her own interest. My wife and I, we've got things that we've shown her that she gets to enjoy with us. One of the things as a family that we like to do is we watch wrestling together, and it's
Oh,
this
sick.
cheesy thing. But it's so much fun, and she gets into it, and it's our family thing. So she's got this interest that I gave her, but then she's got all of her own interests. So yeah, she is a different person, and she's continuing to grow. And it's one of those things. I mean, just getting a front row seat to that is just it's awesome.
I mean, I can imagine that being like the pure joy that comes out of parenthood, man. Like you are raising a child, and a lot of you is in this child, and just being part of that journey. I mean, I know not everybody has great folks, and it's not that same kind of experience, but I think I've had a similar one with my folks, where they felt that way about me. And I mean, I don't know for you, but as I've gotten older, I definitely appreciate my parents more, and just thinking about like because at my age, they were immigrants that moved to a whole new country, trying to figure out how to navigate. And for me, I've been sheltered in the same kind of area, same state my whole life, and it's just like a whole different experience. So I
Yeah.
definitely appreciate my parents who were the explorers, and the people who want to try something new in their life. Which is, I don't know, man. That always amazes me because I haven't done it myself, I guess.
I get that. I mean, and I think you're right. I mean, I definitely, as I get older, and especially having a kid now, I appreciate what they had to do and how they had to struggle and go without, for my brother and sister now. Um, so it's definitely, you get a new set of eyes on it as you get older. Um, because when you grow up, I think you appreciate the things you get to a degree, right? So I appreciate this toy I have. I'm glad I have it. I appreciate this new Nintendo I got for Christmas. But what I don't understand is that this equates to my dad's work. My dad working 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, however much time. It's we don't understand that when we're a kid, that this shiny new thing we got. All we know is that we want it. My friend down the street got it, so I want one too. This is a couple hours of work for my parents in order to make this happen. So I think you do get an appreciation. I want
Oh,
to go back though. You said that your parents immigrated. So where did they immigrate from?
the Philippines. I'm Filipino American, uh, and I had to add that American part at the end just because it's. I think like I don't know how where of you are about how the culture is, but I think there's a separation between people who've lived there, born there, and people who've come to America.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think on the surface everything's fine and dandy, but like when we get into the deeper roots of it, there is I think some kind of feeling that we're different. And like I know for myself when I go to the Philippines, like when I was a kid, I remember thinking like, "Oh, this feels like home," right? Because it was the majority. I was part of the majority there. Uh, and as I've gotten older, it's like, yeah, I'm still part of the majority, but I'm an outsider coming in at this point in my life. Everyone can see me as an American. It's not like, oh, you're not Filipino, you're American. And over here, it's the opposite. It's like, oh, you're not really American, you're Filipino. So that's something I've always had on my mind sometimes.
See, I can't say I understand just because I've never lived that experience. I was born in North Carolina. My parents were both from here, and back generations. My wife, though, her parents immigrated from Honduras and Nicaragua, so she's that
Mm.
first generation born in the states, and she's kind of shared that with me too. That experience of not fully fitting in here or there, and it being this I guess this balance of okay, you know, we're American, but there's this otherness, not otherness. I guess that's the wrong way to say it. There's something more at home, culturally. And then whenever they've gone back to Honduras and Nicaragua when they were children, that sense of like, okay, you are of here, but you are an American. And that's I've tried to understand that as we talked over the years, but it's I don't have the reference point for that, and it does sound challenging to do that.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't know if you ever felt like you went to a place you didn't feel like you belonged.
Yeah.
I think it's a similar feeling. I don't think it has necessarily have to do with your ethnicity, but it could just be anything. Like for someone who doesn't like sports, going to a game it just feels foreign. It doesn't feel like you know I'll enjoy this. But yeah, it's that feeling is not the best. And I don't know if I've fully solved it for myself. And maybe you could tell your partner as well. But for me, it's put me in this place where I just feel like maybe I can't be fully accepted there or here, but I'm in the bigger picture in the world. You know, I tell people I'm an Earthling. Like I'm a person of Earth.
Yeah.
So
So she and I have this conversation regularly. I mean, because I'll call it out. Being in an interracial couple in the South, we have not dealt with somebody calling us out like, "Oh, what you're doing is wrong." It's all this. We haven't had the blatant call out, but there have been the things out in public, and you get a look from somebody. I know whenever we've gone to restaurants, like we went to a Dominican restaurant that her family knows. Not long after we started dating, and one of the women that works there, she asked her in Spanish, why are you with a white boy? And so my wife, it's this like justification of he's a good guy. I mean, it's he just happens to be white. With my family, I was always worried that I was going to hear something from them, and I'd already kind of prepared myself. If I ever did, I was just going to be really straightforward. But you make a good point. I mean, we can divide ourselves as much as we want based on race or where you're from, but at the end of the day, we all live here. We have way more in common than we don't. That's the thing I wish more people would understand. And this is maybe where the being too optimistic comes into play. But everybody's got the same basic wants and needs. If we get hung up on where we're different, that's where I think we start to struggle as a culture, as a people, as a race. And I say race as in, like you said, human race, Earthling. I don't know. I don't know.
yeah,
It just
man. Yeah, I was gonna say like I hope you don't ever feel bad about being an optimist. I struggle with myself just because I'm always overthinking and trying to see both sides and stuff. But like I'm happy to be an optimist. I think it's rooted in being hopeful. Like I think you're a hopeful
Yeah.
person in that sense. And I think we need more of that. Um, like if I try not to follow the news, but I do. I try not to be on social media, but I'm on there. So I just see a lot of negative stuff, right, in the news and what people share and what people put out there. Because for some reason, like we're drawn to that too, right? Or like people in general just want to see bad stuff happening and want to see a video of bad stuff happening. Um,
No.
and so for me, it's like my take on it is that I'd rather be on that other side pushing out that positive energy to the max. Be optimistic, be hopeful as much as possible, because life is gonna beat us down as much as it can. And I've seen a lot of folks lose hope, and a lot of folks, just fall into the norm and not try, which for me, I can't say that's the right decision or not for themselves, but I would like to hope that people can still feel hopeful and optimistic about things.
Of course. The way you were saying that, that just made me think of something. Is that there can be some pain in being optimistic sometimes, but I think I'd rather be disappointed because I was hoping for the best than be feel vindicated that I expected the worst.
For sure, for sure. And so, earlier, I for- you had to talk about like raising children, and I don't know if that's the best way, but something that has been one of my mantras is like no expectations, like be
Right.
hopeful, but don't expect anything, because I think expectations, like it causes pain,
Yeah.
and even that is rooted in thinking something like it could be body pain, mental pain, emotional pain, but it comes from like you have this solid idea in your head and that crumbles, and all of a sudden it's like how do you deal with that? And I think that's what happens with pain. Like but so if you don't, the less expectations you have, good for better or worse, because I know a lot of people disagree on me on that. um it'll shield you. It'll keep you flowing. At least for me, in my case, it's like, okay, that didn't turn out how I expected, but what am I going to do in this moment? Like it's it, I think it's a balance, like all things. But yeah, as far as teaching someone not to have expectations, I think it's the worst, because the opposite of that, having expectations and things pulling through, that's such a big high. Like
Yeah.
that's something we all chase for. It's like we called that, I called that. But yeah, so
No, I'm with you. I'm with you. That makes sense to me. It's one of those things. What is it? Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. And just going to see what happens. I mean, I don't know if you've ever heard this idea of you can't control how you feel about something, but you can control how you respond to it. So when it doesn't go your way, or it doesn't go the way you hoped or you expected, it's okay to be disappointed. And but how do you then turn that around? How do you take that into something else?
I'm not sure, man. I mean, you mean turning hope into something else, or
Well, and I don't know. I don't even know if I've got a question on that. I guess
mm.
it's just more of a thought of I don't know how you would do that in that situation, but I think there's benefit into trying to find the positive or trying to take the disappointment and trying to see, okay, how do I turn this into something else? You
Oh
know,
yeah, absolutely. I think that's definitely how I've been trying to approach things a little bit more. Um, but it's also like, yeah, I'm very open to others' perspectives, so I feel like this is a constant like conversation that happens. Is that you know you can't avoid it, and you have to give yourself time to be in that disappointment. And I don't know. For me, it's like how much time should I give it? Is it something I
right?
do quickly and let go, or am I supposed to like wait on it for maybe a day, 2 week, and then move on? So in my mind, like I get it. It may look like I'm avoiding disappointment or those feelings, but for me, it's like I just don't want to spend time on it. It's an active thing. But yeah.
No, I get that. I mean, I can't fault somebody who doesn't want to dwell on the negative.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I haven't had therapy in a long time. Maybe I should talk to a therapist about it just to see if they think it's a healthy thing for me to do. But yeah.
I'll use that as a plug. Because I will say I know a lot of people still feel icky talking about therapy. I know especially a lot of men don't feel comfortable talking about it, but I'll call out. I've done therapy before, and it helped me a ton during the time. Just an unbiased opinion or voice to just talk you through things and just listen to you is invaluable. So anybody that maybe hears this and if you've ever had the thought, should I see a therapist? I'm gonna vote yes. I'm just gonna throw that out there.
Give it a shot. For me, we talked about adults in our lives growing up. That was the first time I was exposed to therapy. From middle school to high school and a little bit of college, was like these older folks that were willing to listen to me, give me advice that didn't really know me. So another group of people who've probably left their impact on me. But yeah, therapy back then, just being exposed to it, I didn't think there was any stigma around it. I wasn't thinking that way. I think my parents knew, and they were kind of concerned, but they thankfully allowed me to continue, and it's something I chose. Like
Right.
the very first time, the first session was because I'd had some troubling behavior. I'll admit that, but that's when they recommended me to go. But then in high school, it wasn't recommended. It was just more so like I enjoyed that experience. Let me try to find resources again. And then in college, the same thing where, you know, that's the interesting thing in college. It was like only 3 sessions, and then you'd have to start paying. Um, and like, I don't know, man. I be thinking how therapy works nowadays, and I've tried BetterHelp. Maybe through the pandemic, I was like, let me just give it another shot, and it was cool, but I don't know if in your experience, but in a lot of folks' experience, there's like this wall that happens with your therapist. Like there's still you got to be able to trust them. You got to be able to open up to them fully, or else you probably won't get the help that you really need.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of folks that feel that way about therapy. It's like, oh, they didn't really do anything for me. And then in my mind, it's like, well, did you guys really connect, or was it just like, oh, how are you doing? I'm cool. This kind of bothered me. You know, there's still that surface, and I think the deeper you can connect with your therapist. So for anyone thinking about it, make sure it's the right person. And I think even with BetterHelp, which is cool, if you want to spend the time to read everyone's profile and try to find the right person for you, you can. But I think even that, like my experience there and as a kid, face to face has always been better. I think there's like this energy that's shared in a room, versus like even though we're doing it right now over camera, over the web. Um, for something like therapy, be as intimate like in close space, because I think that's where the true secrets, and like your therapist is going to be able to read you a lot better like in person, like so yeah, that's my take on therapy.
Right there. Two thumbs up. I think for anyone listening, go see a therapist. So let me transition a little bit because so this is our last meal. So the whole point of the podcast is that we talk with folks about people that you've lost in your life, be it loved ones through passing away, through relationships falling apart. That loved one, maybe it's a partner, maybe it's a family member, maybe it's a friend. But it's all framed around food. Um, and I stress this, I think, with folks because to me, there's such a connection between the act of eating and sharing food with people you care about. We talked a little bit earlier about, your parents coming here from the Philippines. So I'm sure there's a cultural impact there for you as well with food. I know with my wife, what she shared with me about how, food that her parents ate growing up, how that's something that was comforting for them when they were here, that they could still have that. I think about to my own childhood, the food that we shared. Um, so I guess I'll kind of start there. And if you just want to tell us who we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, man. I want to shout out my sister, uh Joanna Marie. We call her JM in the family, but yeah, we'll be talking about her today.
Okay. So, tell me about her.
Man, um that's an interesting question, just because I've never gotten to meet her. So anything I can say right now is probably just through stories from relatives and my parents. but I think she was actually a pretty sociable person as well. You know, she passed away when she was 8, but by that time, like my mom was telling me that she was the kind of person who just talked to strangers and like be in their face and like try to get to know folks. I believe she was an entertainer as well. My mom told me that she tried to audition for like a part on TV at one point. There was some awareness of like I want to entertain folks. I want to say like I don't want to. I feel weird saying it because I don't know if that's what my sister's intentions were. Maybe she was just a little girl, trying to enjoy life and was doing things that she found fun, and there was no like bigger picture just yet.
Yeah.
But something about her is mystical to me too. Just because my mom told me before she died, she had like my sister told her that you're gonna have a son and you should name him so and so, which is my name now.
Yeah.
And that's a story from my mom. And I don't know if that's a little bit of seasoning on there, but I'd like to believe it, and it makes me feel more connected to her. So, yeah.
So yeah, I was gonna ask if you feel like because of that, it's almost she saw you coming. If that felt like there was the if that's where the connection for you felt.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's a very like it's an interesting feeling. Um, for me, I think I don't know if you're supernatural or like open to all that stuff, but even though I choose,
Definitely open.
I, I try not to be, but I'm also the kind of person who's done a Ouija board before, and has had that experience. So if someone told me like, "Oh, you're a light spirit," that means supernatural stuff is gonna like be more prone to you, and I'm like, okay, that's kind of scary. Um, but yeah, like even now, just talking about her, like I don't know if it's my nervousness or like some chills, but it makes me like me talking about her makes me feel like she's listening, you know, anytime. So it's
Yeah.
always kind of weird. But yeah, so that I think the connection's still there. She's a big reason why I started my podcast as well. If someone was able to have an interview with her, just so I could hear how she talks instead of, just hearing it from other people. Um, that'd be great.
So I will say too. So you talk about the spiritual, this spiritual thing, the supernatural thing. I've always very much been on the. I'm on the fence of it. Of I don't know. I'm not sure. I'll never. I don't believe in ever judging somebody for that because it to me it's one of those things. I mean, I don't know. I couldn't say with any certainty one way or the other. But also I think it would be crazy to tell somebody that you can't feel something. I mean, you can't tell somebody what else they someone else what they do or do not feel. So for you to say that you feel that energy and that connection when you talk about her, to me that's real. You know. I will say so you mentioned the podcast you started um and it was kind of because of her. And so if you I know typically we do plugs at the end, but if you want to just kind of what's the concept of the podcast, and then how does that relate to your sister?
Yeah, yeah. So my podcast is 34 questions. And there's a lot of ways you can look at it. And I think if you read my descriptions, read my invitations, it says a lot. And it doesn't really focus on one thing. I think that's still coming for me as far as like the number one thing about this podcast is. But how it relates to my sister is it's a way for us to leave something for our descendants. If you ever thought about ancestors or relatives you never got to meet, either they're really far away or they passed too soon. I think it's a way for that person and ourselves to leave something for our future descendants and relatives and people who are connected with us. And like thinking about your daughter at 5 years old, getting
Yeah.
to meet her father at this age, I think is a crazy experience, for anyone, to be able to see that. And I don't know about what your goals are for your podcast, but for me, like I have very ambitious goals, but I'm also as hopeful as I am. I want to be realistic. So the way I kind of see it, and for anyone who's interested on coming through or being a guest, it's something that's just going to increase in value over time. You know,
Yeah.
maybe not right now. You don't want to see yourself last week just having a conversation, but 10 years from now, you'll be like, damn, that was me 10 years ago, and now my daughter at 15 can watch it with me and be like, damn, Dad, that was you. Uh, but yeah, so that's where I think the payoff will be for me. And yes, connected to my sister, I just wish there were some home videos with her sometimes.
So it's not something there weren't any videos or anything like that.
So we had a bunch of pictures. I don't know too many about videos. There was actually some videos. That's not true. There was some videos of her birthdays, which was great to see. But like if you ever seen what's that one? Kids Say the Darndest Things show.
Yeah.
Like I wish there was that kind of version. Because just like I, I mean, I don't know any way I could feel more connected to her, which I feel like honestly, man, no one's really asked me about my sister, and when they do, I usually curb it right away and don't go in depth. So this is therapeutic for me. But yeah, I think just having anything extra would just make me feel closer to her.
Yeah. So I'll say, that's a reason I wanted to do this podcast. You asked me about goals for it, and honestly, beyond like growth, it's just this idea of connecting with people, but then also offering people a chance to grieve and to talk about loved ones. Because so I lost my grandfather last year. Um, my grandfather's a really good man, and when you lose somebody, it is people feel bad for you, but it's always an awkward conversation. It's never more than surface level, or it feels like it's never more than surface level. Like, oh, how are you holding up? Do you need anything? But we don't take the time to ask about the person. We don't take
Mm,
time to really, I think, you know, celebrate that person. So, I want people to have a chance to celebrate that person. And I know you said that you didn't have a chance to meet her, but clearly this is someone who has they mean something to you. They've been there in the background. I mean, they've had an impact on your life. So, I want you to have that chance to celebrate your sister and talk about who she was, and what food did she like, what did she like to do. I know that we you already said that she liked to entertain people, but to celebrate who she was as a person.
yeah, man. I mean, I think as a person, I wish I knew. I can make a lot of assumptions just based on the stories, and I think that's what hurts the most for me is that that person is not someone I know at the moment. I don't think I won't ever know. It's just that there's just certain limitations at this point. Um, so yeah, that's a tough question, man. Because like I said, I feel like when I talk about her, she's watching and or listening, and I don't want
Yeah.
her to feel like I'm misrepresenting her because we haven't had that connection. If anything, man, like still wanted to believe that I feel her presence in these moments. I just think she's a caring person. I think she's been looking out for me for a long time and still does. Uh, so yeah, I think some way that energy is still there, which I won't deny, and I definitely appreciate.
Yeah, of course. So one thing I'll say though is, I know you said that. I guess it sounds like the fear is, talking about who she was and not feeling like you knew her, but it's that familial bond though, and
Hmm.
I said, it's again, I can't pretend to know that feeling, you know, of losing a sibling like that, especially, one that you didn't get a chance to meet in person. But there is that, I think, that familial bond of the people that are close to you, that are your blood and are your people. You know,
Hmm.
what? So let me ask you: growing up, how did your parents talk about her?
Always great stories. Like always stuff that the whole naming me story uh was something I've always kind of thought about, like, was that real? Like, because it sounds so outrageous. But if she just happened to say it and it really did happen, I'd rather believe that story. So that's where I'm at. Uh, as
I
far as my
wouldn't
parents
question
talk,
that. Yeah.
I know from my parents, like when I was younger, it was all the great stories, all the birthdays, showing me the videos, the pictures, and all that. And as I got older, my parents treated me more mature, so they kind of told me about the struggle, about what it felt like afterwards, which I mean, I can't imagine what it's like for my parents at that time.
No.
And I think, it's one of those things. I don't know if you ever seen any how it's portrayed in media, TV shows and movies, but they always seem to say you can't ever get over it. You'll never get over losing a child, right? So it's like, in my mind, the frame that I see my parents in is that I always keep that in mind too. However, whatever decisions they made with me growing up, whatever dreams and goals they had for me, I'm sure that that experience, has given them some kind of perspective that's different from other folks. So in my mind, like, even though maybe there's things that could have been different, I don't hold anything against my parents as far as their parenting and the choices that they made, because they went through something that you know and anyone would have changed through that experience as well.
Yeah.
uh so yeah, it's both of that a little bit, that's happened in my life. And at this point, I'm just coming to peace with it, like doing my podcast as much as I can, and interviewing all these folks for that purpose. It it, it makes me feel a little closer to closure, maybe not closure, but like stitching those wounds a little bit for myself. So yeah.
I will say I can't even fathom losing a child. I think that would be any parent's nightmare. Um, it's honestly it's one of those things. Anytime if that creeping thought ever pops in, like, oh, what would you do? What would happen? It's one of those you have to chase off just because it's too much to even think about. So for your parents to go through that is my condolences to them. My condolences to you. I mean, it's really there are no words for it. There are just
There
no
isn't,
words for it.
man. Yeah. There really isn't. Like, going to a funeral for, a grandparent is different, I think,
Yeah,
to going to a funeral for a child. It's that truly, like, what could you say? Like, that surface level, like, do
yeah,
we even touch it? Because I feel like even with a grandparent, that the reason why people, for any lost loved one, it's like you want to say something, and it feels almost worse not to say anything. So it's like, but you don't know what's sensitive. At least that's how I take it. Like, I've been to funerals, and I'm definitely surface level. Like, do I really ask them right now? Like, oh, well, what was your favorite time with your like loved one? Or that whole just funeral situation. I don't think it's best for grieving. Could that be it? Like,
yeah,
because you invite people, and then depending on how you feel about those people, that's on your mind. Like, it should, I think it should be a private thing, where if maybe a person gets a chance to come up, and then one by one say their piece, and then move on. But for it to be like a spectacle, a gathering, I think there's a lot of pressure that gets put onto it.
yeah,
And like, I also want to shout out my grandparents, because they were also the reason why 34 questions came about, is that I never got to meet them either. And by the time I got to meet them, they were either, like, too far, or closer to the end than to be able to conversate with me in a meaningful way. Like, as a
yeah.
baby, I'm not getting to know them, and so now I just wish I knew them as people. But yeah.
So that's I mean that's where it comes down to. It was that connection, and what you said about giving people something that they can share. I mean that really, and I'm not trying to inflate your ego or anything, but I think this really it deserves to be said that I mean what you're doing though by giving people that opportunity it is that thing that in 10 years that they can share with their kid and say, hey, this is a side of me you've never seen. Or, God forbid somebody's lost during that time. It really is a relic, that a friend or a family member could have later on, just to still be connected to that person and still have a piece of them, and, maybe learn something about them they didn't know. So, I mean, what you're
For sure.
doing, it's incredible.
I appreciate that, man. And I mean, I think we like yourself doing your part, like doing this is the same thing. I just been able to like package it in a way where I can frame it in that sense because it is my reasoning. But this experience, this video is a very, I think, a similar thing to what I'm doing. Just showing people in different lights. Because like right now, we have YouTube, we have social media, we have all this content that maybe I don't know, not everyone's making that content for themselves or like putting it out there in the sense that the whole world can see it. Maybe you're recording to yourself, maybe you're able to create that collection with that in mind, and that's total props. But for folks that like, I'm not very comfortable being on camera, even though I host a podcast. But I have to
Same.
share it. I have to share the screen. I have to be with somebody. I don't know if you ever tried to shoot solo videos before, but I've done it, and it never feels good. Like like attention's on me. And yeah, so that's why I had to create this platform where I can share the stage and like and bring people up as much as I can. Um, but yeah, that threw me off. But can you remind me what the original question was?
I'm honestly not even sure. I
Oh,
just
it's all good.
it's
We're just
it's
flowing. We're just flowing.
that's it. Yeah, but really, it's just appreciate taking the time to appreciate what you're providing people through your
Oh yeah,
podcast, but also just this idea that we can. It for me it just comes back to we can celebrate people that we've lost. Um, I will ask about this because whenever we were talking before we set up the show, you'd mentioned something about Jollibee.
yeah, Jollibee. Have you ever had it yourself?
Okay, I have not. I know about it from watching Anthony Bourdain. I know. I'm a list keeper. I keep all kinds of lists, and one of the ones I have is restaurant bucket list, and
Hmm.
Jollibee is on there. I just from the first time I saw it, I was like, I want to try this. So talk
Yeah,
to me about it.
yeah. Let's plug in Jollibee. It was one of those places where in the pictures, in the videos, that's where my sister celebrated her birthdays. That was just something that was I felt like her happy place.
Yeah.
I never really got to see her go any theme parks or anything like that. So maybe the closest thing for her was Jollibee. But yeah, it's just something for me at least that's something tangible and concrete that I can hold on to and be like, if I go to a Jollibee, it would feel like I'm sharing a meal with my sister in a certain way. Not saying I don't get that from my mom's cooking or all that, but for it to just be like me growing up, that was the imagery, that was the memory that I could see, like, and actually feel like, oh, I'm here at a Jollibee in America or in the Philippines. They always try to keep it similar style, similar imagery too. So yeah, it definitely makes me feel like I'm having I can go to a place that my sister enjoyed, and I can enjoy it too. So yeah, shout out Jollibee. You need a commercial. I can do that whole thing over again.
But so for you, Jollibee, it's not fast food. It really is it's a tangible connection to her.
Oh yeah, and I don't have it all the time. It's not like I go to Jollibee all the time, but I know when I do go, it's like okay, that thought crosses my mind. But yeah, it's definitely the tangible thing. I'm trying to think what else me and my sister could connect on. My mom said she was a big fan of Michael Jackson, and
All right.
being a kid, right? Like probably doing all those crazy dance moves in the '80s. But yeah, so besides that, I think like as what the character, not the character, but the profile that I have of my sister is very limited, man. And that's why like I don't know, maybe after this and I sleep tonight, she'll pop up in my dream and just like give me some real game because I think that's happened before,
Yeah.
where she's popped up in dreams and whatnot.
been there to visit and just check on you.
Yeah. And growing up, man, I had so many close calls as far as, you know, putting myself in really dangerous situations, but I always seem to avoid it just by an inch. And I know my mom believes that was my sister for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So I'll ask one more thing about the food. Do you know, did she have a favorite thing at Jollibee?
Man, honestly, I can't think of it off the top of my head. I want to say it was a spaghetti though. It's like Filipino spaghetti, so it's a little bit sweet. But yeah, and that's like a staple of theirs for a long time. So I believe it was the spaghetti, and of course the chicken. But
Oh
aside from the
yeah.
chicken, that was the spaghetti.
All right. So for anybody that goes to Jollibee, if you try it for the first time, when I finally do get to cross out the bucket list, it will be spaghetti for sure.
Oh man, that's a huge honor, man. Definitely appreciate it.
Of course.
And I'm sure the thought's gonna run like, oh man, this is what 34 was talking about. So thank you
Yeah,
for allowing me that space in your mind, man.
of course, of course. Thank you for coming on for sharing. I'll be the first to admit that this isn't easy, to talk about people that we've lost, but I do hope it's a chance to just, like I said, just to honor that person and feel some closeness to them. So I appreciate you coming on and talking.
No doubt, man. And like I'll tell you, I think at least for my family, if you guys watch this and friends, this probably the most interesting interview I've done, just because it was about something that I hardly ever talk about. So I appreciate you giving me the space and just the ear to listen, man. Um, Thank you.
Of course. Before I let you go, I just want to give you a chance. I know we've talked about your podcast a little bit, but do you want to go ahead and plug that or anything else that you're working on for us?
Yeah, man. So if you are interested in the 34 Questions podcast, it's 34questions.com. You'll find the links to all the major podcasting streaming sites on there. If not, you can also check out 34 Questions on Instagram at 34 Questions. Everything is 34 Questions. You look it up, it'll help me with my SEO. So I'll just look up 34 Questions. If you really want, I'm gonna put myself on blast right now. It's, you could put in my real name too, Jann Ramirez. 34 Questions. Then the Google search should pop up. So yeah, there goes my plugs.
All
Still
right.
working on those, man.
It always feels awkward. I love
Yeah.
I've loved this has been an experiment for me doing this podcast, but just I love the idea of getting to talk to people, and just have conversations and just, like I said, just connect with people. I love that part, but the part of plugging things that still feels awkward. And it's that's out of my comfort zone. So I totally understand where you're coming from.
We just gotta exercise it, man.
That's
That's what
it.
my friends always tell me. It's like find your way of saying things, and then stick to that. Don't try to sound like anybody else, but try to be yourself. So that's it takes time to find
Yeah,
that out. So
I agree. Well, hey, thank you for being on. I appreciate it.
no problem, man. And looking forward to your turn on my podcast,
Yeah.
especially now that we got to touch space.
Oh yeah, we have to flip that around. So for anybody listening, yeah, be sure to check out 34. I'll be on there soon.
Yeah, like no doubt. I'll save for the other. I'll save the other stuff off camera, but for sure.
All right,
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you again.
All right, thank you first of all to our guest 34 for sharing his story about his sister. Um, these stories are never easy, but having him come on and talk with us about it and how he's processed that and how that's impacted his life, I just really want to say thank you to 34 for that. If you're interested in hearing more from him and listening to his podcast, I would really recommend it. It's 34 Questions, 34 Questions, wherever you stream your podcast, as well as 34questions.com. You also can find him at 34 Questions on Twitter and Instagram. You also can follow Our Last Meal on Twitter and Instagram at Our Last Meal Pod, or visit us at ourlastmeal.com. I mentioned this at the top of the show, but I'll say it again. If you're interested in being a guest on the story, if you've got a story of loss, grief, and food that you want to share with us, please reach out. Click on share your story at the website, or you can reach out through email. And I always like to tell people it doesn't have to fit into one certain mold what that story is or what that conversation is. If you're even remotely interested, I'd love to talk with you. So reach out to us there. You also, again, if you have a chance to go in and rate and review on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen, that really does help the podcast out. Regardless, I appreciate you listening. And in the meantime, until next time, take the time, share a meal with someone you care about.